Hey, how are you? Welcome to another tutorial here on my Rode Studio channel. In this video we return to another artist of the indie dance genre whose music has evolved for 3 years, marking a certain musical style that sets him apart from other artists. I'm talking about Raxon. For this production I used these 2 songs as references. Here I have a group called Drums Group. Inside it contains 3 tracks. The first track is a MIDI channel where I have stored the indie dance drum box. This device can be downloaded on my Patreon or Gumroad page. In this device I selected 2 percussive samples, which is the kick, and later we are going to find the kick and the snare. The last 2 channels are audio tracks where I put the hi-hat sample loop here. Altogether it would sound like this. We are going to analyze the synthesis of this bass. For this we are going to deactivate the effects and we concentrate on the synthesis. For the synthesis of this sound we are going to use 3 instruments, B, C, and D. In instrument A I was testing with some oscillators, but I did not like the combination with instrument B. Let's see what we have in each of these instruments. In instrument B as a sound source we have the Mini Brute using a saw-type oscillator. In instrument C we have a sine oscillator. This is to give this bass more strength in the sub-bass part. And on instrument D, I have a noise oscillator to give it the texture to give us that more analog sound to this bass. After this I am going to move on to the filter. I activate the filter, but first I have to design the envelope of my filter, in which I have it like this: attack closed, the decay slightly open, sustain lower than the decay, and the release of this height. From there I will go to the filter, I will open the cutoff and I will close it. Now we are going to activate the arpeggio tool. For the arpeggio I designed this rhythmic pattern. After the sound design we are going to move on to the effects. Here I'm starting with the equalizer, cutting a bit the sub-bass frequencies that I don't need. I don't want to add so much weight to the bass, so I remove this area a bit. Then with the compressor we just compress a little bit and I get to the multiband dynamics part, in the which I am compressing more in the high frequencies and a little in the mid frequencies. Then we have the overdrive to generate harmonic distortion around 177 Hz so that this bass stands out in the mix. I am going to deactivate all these effects and I will activate each one to listen to the change of this sound. In this group below we're going to move on to the second bass instrument that we have here. I'm going to turn off each of the effects and off we go to synthesis. For the design of this sound I am using 3 instruments, A, B and C. In the instrument I have as a sound source I have the sample option where I am choosing the MS-20 with a sawtooth oscillator. On instrument B I have a noise oscillator. And on instrument C I have this sample called OMG1. I am going to deactivate the filter, and in this way we are going to listen cleanly to each of the sound sources of these 3 instruments. In the instrument A, I am going to activate the unison, which is a modulation effect where the range is in coarse mode. I'm going to deactivate the B and the C so that we hear this effect in the instrument A. Now with instrument B and C. We move on to the filter, and in the filter envelope configuration I'm going to leave the attack a little higher, the decay at this point, sustain and release like this. Another view of the envelope. Now I'm going to open the cutoff and I'm going to close it. This was the only thing I did here inside the instrument. Now let's move on to the effects I added on the instrument track. I activate the equalizer where I cut the low-pass filter and high-pass filter where I try to remove the weight of the bass for the synth since we previously have another bass. With the multi-band dynamics I am compressing the low frequencies and the mids, then I have the overdrive where I am generating harmonic distortion in the mid-range part, I have the delay effect at 19% dry/wet in ping-pong mode, and it finally, use this reverb preset called Snare Room at 27%. After I have this instrument, I'm going to solo the track. This sound really has a very basic synthesis, but the most interesting thing about it are the automations that I play during production. For example, I'm automating the cutoff, the shape parameter, and the coarse pitch. Let's move on to the synthesis, but first I turn off the track effects. For this synthesis I am only going to use an instrument that is using a saw-square type oscillator. Two important tools that we are going to use for this synthesis are the arpeggio and the filter. Let's listen to the reaction of the shape parameter. What the shape does is modify the wave, making it a bit more square. I activate the filter and the arpeggiator. Another parameter, as I mentioned, is the coarse pitch, making a drag from one note to another. And there is a part where I am automating the cutoff. In another area, the coarse pitch started to do something very random. I was looking for an interesting sound for this production. I activate the multi-band dynamics, saturator, and equalizer effects. I've heard some Raxon songs where the vocals add the repeat effect. I love that effect for indie dance productions. I've applied it several times in my productions. I use a plugin called Effectrix, but in this case I will use the native Ableton tools. With repeat I achieve this effect.
Deep in the underground, underground, a broken heart.
Then I have a multi-band dynamics, which is a multi-band compressor. Then I add the chorus effect by adding a bit of modulation effect and add movement to this voice using the autopan. I add the delay slap effect with the echo audio effect. And finally a compressor that is doing the function of sidechain.
Underground, 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 a broken heart, deep in the underground. I wanna be the place to start.
Another synthesizer that I have in this production is this one. I turn off the effects and we concentrate on the synthesis. For the synthesis of this sound, I'm just going to use an oscillator one, using the beating one wavetable with the wave reader at this point. The frequency parameter will be linked to the envelope of the amplifier. Depending on how the amplifier envelope is configured is how the filter will react. Now we move on to the effects. I add the echo effect where it's doing the delay slap function, saturator to add that harmonic distortion to give this synth more presence, pedal effect to add punch to the mids, and the equalizer. I'm going to activate each of the audio effects to hear the transformation of this sound. In order not to lengthen this video, we are going to check other instruments that we can find in the project. Remember that you can get this Ableton project on my Gumroad and Patreon account. Let's listen to the latest instruments we have in this production. Let's listen to the stab groups. I have a group of synth pads. We have reached the end of this video tutorial. I hope I have been able to meet your expectations with this Raxon style production. Leave me the comments, which artist would you like me to produce to review? See you in the next video.